So you prayed and it didn't happen. Not when you wanted it, not how you wanted it, maybe not at all. And somewhere in that silence, you started to wonder what that says about God. I want to share something with you that changed how I see every unanswered prayer I've ever had in my life and will ever have in my life. But let's start with that declaration: God did not answer my prayer. You've probably said this at some point yourself, or maybe you thought it without vocalizing it. If you've never said it, I'm sure you've heard somebody else say it. Maybe someone in your family or a friend group or even at church. Now, from my perspective, I've rarely ever heard someone say this without a subtle tone of resentment or bitterness. It's very rare that you hear that said in a positive manner. When someone says, God did not answer my prayer, it's usually coming from a place of frustration and seeking answers as to why it didn't happen. I try and teach people to think critically about the things they say about God because they're often laced with assumptions about God that they may not realize. In this instance, saying God did not answer my prayer has three fundamental assumptions that are built into it. First, it assumes that God did not answer when you wanted Him to answer. It's easy to attach your own due date to your prayers and then hold God accountable to those deadlines. Second, it assumes God didn't answer how you wanted Him to answer. We don't only bring our own timelines, we also bring our own outlines. This means we dream up what the answered prayer is going to look like and what it's going to feel like when it's finally answered. Lastly, it assumes that God isn't doing something else in the process. God is not a mailman, delivering the things that we request of Him where we want it to happen and how we want it to happen. God is operating from more information than we have, and He's building according to a master plan for your life that you do not have access to. Prayer is not a way to get what we want. It's actually a tool for God to develop what He wants in our lives. Here's an example. Maybe you pray, God, give me a house, and the house never comes. But what does come is a book about managing your finances. Because the truth is, you're in debt with a credit score that no bank would ever approve for a mortgage. God may not have answered it the way you wanted, but that doesn't mean He did not answer your prayer. If your only criteria for deciding if God answered the prayer is to hold up your picture of what you expect the answered prayer to look like and comparing it to the results in front of you, then you're highly likely to miss what God is really doing. But if you expand your scope for how God operates and what answered prayer looks like, then your net will become larger and more capable of catching the things that God is really doing in response to your prayer. Here's the bottom line. Most unanswered prayers are actually differently answered or still unfolding in our lives. But let's be honest. Sometimes there isn't something happening in the background that we don't realize. Sometimes the answer really is no. Not only that, the answer is in direct opposition to what you know to be true about God's will. Parents get divorced, someone dies from cancer, someone you love becomes an atheist and rejects Christianity. When this is the outcome, as humans, we want to explain why things happened the way that they did. And I want to encourage you with something. Don't do this. There is a tension that we have to live with in this life. Not everything that happens is God's perfect will in a broken world. I think someone who handled this tension really well in Scripture is a man named Job. Job lost everything that mattered to him in the course of a few hours. His whole family was gone. All of his livestock was gone, which was his source of income. It's like losing your job. They all died from catastrophic events. And there's not much in this life that can touch the amount of pain and loss that Job went through. But let's read how Job reacted to receiving this devastating news. says, "Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. It says that Job first tore his robes and shaved his head. In the ancient Near East, tearing your robe and shaving your head was a sign of grieving and mourning. They took grieving and mourning very seriously because they knew it's an important process to dealing with loss in our lives. But look at what else he did. He fell to the ground and worshiped the Lord. He doesn't do only one, but both. He grieves and he worships. Oftentimes we can do one and neglect the other. Sometimes we grieve without worship. This is often when we feel God is to blame for our loss, and we begin to question His character. We don't want to worship Him because we honestly wonder if He's worthy of it. The other end is to worship without grieving. This often happens when people either want to skip the pain of grieving and drown it out with other activities like worship, or when they feel like it's not spiritual to grieve and mourn. So they begin to worship, which is the spiritual thing to do. But neither one of these extremes is the biblical prescription for loss in our lives. It's both. It's mourning and it's worship. It says Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. What this tells us is that his mourning was not sinful, and his worship was the same worship he would have offered before the tragedy ever took place, because he refused to allow his view of God to change in light of the events that had just occurred. Be honest for a moment. After a prayer wasn't answered when or how you wanted, did you start to view God differently? Not just distant, but did some part of you start to wonder if He was against you, or if He couldn't be trusted with the next thing that you brought to Him? I know because I did. I spent years praying for a significant other in my life, and she never came. Eventually, I stopped praying because I thought to myself, in full transparency, if I don't pray, then God can't let me down. It wasn't too much longer after that I did end up meeting my now wife. But even after that, there was this lingering self-protective reflex in me. Something was off because I didn't want to pray big prayers anymore. I was afraid that God would let me down, so I just didn't pray them at all. I honestly felt like God was against me. That was until one day I was in prayer a couple of years into my marriage, and God spoke this to me. I am for you, not against you. My prayer had been answered years before, but the damage of allowing myself to question God's character had already been done. But God healed me in that moment. He gave me the truth I needed to rebut the lie I believed, that He wasn't against me. In fact, He was for me. The thing that healed me wasn't getting what I asked for or what I prayed for. It was Him telling me who He was the whole time. If I never met her, that sentence would still have been true. The point in all of this is that no event in life, nothing that could ever happen, can change who God is. Things in life are not always going to go the way that we want them to happen. And I'm not going to sit here and try to give you some shallow explanation as to why they don't happen the way we want them to, as many people try to do. But I will tell you this, none of it will ever change who God is. Our theology of God cannot change based on the circumstances that we encounter in life. But it must remain built on the foundation of Scripture, where God has chosen to reveal Himself to us. There's a prayer that you gave up on. I'm not going to tell you to pray it again, like this is some kind of formula that will finally work this time. Truth is, I don't know how your story ends. I don't know what prayers you're praying. I don't know if the answer is still coming, or if this is one of those circumstances where it never does come. But this is what I do know. Whatever it is, doesn't change who God is. the silence, the loss, the waiting, what's true is that God was always for you. He will always be for you, no matter what happens. That was true before you ever prayed the prayer. It's true even after the answer comes. And it's still true even if it never does. Hey, if this video blessed you, would you please hit the like and subscribe button so that more people can receive this teaching the same way that you did today. Also, check out this next video so that you can continue your journey of building your faith instead of drifting in life. I'll see you in the next video.